Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to wait here for another 30 seconds or so to let more people join. We've got people joining in the waiting room, and we're admitting them as they join. So thanks for your patience. All right, well, thanks again for joining us. Good afternoon. I'm Adam Miller. I'm our communications director here at the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, and it's so great to see you here for another Ask the Alliance. The Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to bring together communities, companies, and conservationists to improve the lands and waters of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We work across the watershed in Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania to implement solutions on the land that lead to a more resilient watershed, and we appreciate you being here. So last summer, we hosted our first ever live talk webinar series, and we called that Breakfast on the Bay. We united Alliance staff's expertise with our partners' experience and explored the impact that we all collectively have on the Bay's health. So as our staff continues to grow, so does our expertise. And this year we decided to rebrand Breakfast on the Bay to Ask the Alliance. And we're asking Alliance staff to share their knowledge and passion for what you can do at home to enjoy and improve the health of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So with that said, I wanted to go through just a little bit of housekeeping. We want these sessions to be interactive, so please feel free to join us with your camera turned on, but please remain on mute. You'll have an opportunity to ask some questions in the last 10 minutes of this session, and you can also submit your questions via the call in the chat box. If you're joining us on Facebook, please feel free to comment your questions, and we'll make sure that Tyler gets those. So without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce and welcome Tyler Walston, our Maryland Agriculture Projects Coordinator, and we're excited for you to learn a little bit more about how you can plant native plants at home to increase habitat and reduce the amount of yard work that you have to do. So welcome, Tyler.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Adam. Welcome, folks. I'm excited to talk to you guys today. Let me go ahead and get situated here and start presenting here. Right. Adam, is that showing up for everybody?
Looks good.
All right, hang on one second. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. Alrighty, folks, sorry about that. I'm going to give a presentation today called How to Lovingly Kill Your Lawn. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. Hopefully, as I share my experiences here on my family farm and reducing my turf lawn to plant native plants, you'll learn a lot. I want to try to answer as many questions as I can. This picture right here is where I live, my family farm. This picture was taken, I believe, in 2017, right around the time I started improving the landscape on the farm to include more native plants. I want you to remember this picture for the end of the presentation. I'm going to show a similar picture that was taken last week to sort of document the progress for you guys. If you look in the back, I'm not sure if you guys can see my cursor, but in the back there are some small seedlings that I just planted that year. They're loblolly pines. Now I've got a row of trees that I've planted along here, and you can just barely make out just a little bit of my first year of my memorial flower garden, which I'll tell you a little bit about that. So my objectives today in this presentation are to demonstrate the benefits of reducing turf lawn at home and replacing it with native plants. And really, I want to give you a practical guide for doing this and build upon our presentation that we gave last year for Breakfast in the Bay on native plants. And ultimately, I want to encourage you guys to experiment in your gardens and learn from your peers. You don't have to be an expert. I'm certainly not an expert. I didn't really know a whole lot when I first got started. But I learned a lot from other folks who are doing this type of work. I think you'll find the gardening community, and particularly the native gardening folks, it's a very welcoming and inclusive group, and most folks are willing to help you out and share resources. Just a quick note of how this presentation is going to go. Adam came down a few weeks ago and we filmed some clips to give you a better view of what's going on in the gardens. So I'll be introducing slides and playing the clips. And some of the videos we filmed pretty close to the road, so there's a little bit of noise. It might be difficult to hear. If you have any issues or you didn't understand something, just let us know in the chat and we'll try to clarify that for you. Adam mentioned the Alliance's values and what we do a little bit. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but I just want to highlight, our three core values. The first one is that we're collaborative. We believe in partnering across sectors and regions to achieve a larger collective impact. For the ag team, that means that we work with corporations, government organizations, farmers. We bring together different skills and expertise, different funding options to make that larger impact, to put best management practices on farm that ultimately increase the health of the Chesapeake Bay. And for us, that happens on a pretty big scale. But as I mentioned before, as you're networking with your native gardening peers and learning from them, you're going to be making an impact on your property at home. Maybe not such a large scale, but as you continue on and plant these native plants, you're going to see the value of that. Just a little bit about me. I'm not going to talk about my educational background and my professional background, just my personal background as it relates to the native gardening and stuff that I'm doing on the farm. I moved into my grandparents' farm in 2015 with Omar. He's my charismatic farm dog, pictured here. He actually has a birthday next week. He turned 7 years old. So if you guys want to wish him a happy birthday in the chat, I will make sure he gets those messages. I have an interest in birds, birding, and gardening. So naturally, when I moved in 2015, I started thinking about improving the habitat on the farm to bring more birds in and things like that. And I grew up helping my maternal grandparents who had a flower shop at their home in the front yard. So I really got an appreciation for flowers in particular and gardening from my grandmother. This is an aerial view of the farm. This is from either late 2015 or early 2016. So I'd only been here for a few months. You can see on either side of the driveway here, there are two pretty good sized hay fields. I've since bumped this hayfield back a little bit, and some of my gardens are in here and some of my plantings. You can see it's mostly turf lawn around here in the 1.5 acres. I do have some maple trees around the house, but it's pretty much turf lawn when I moved in. It's cut off here, but there's a busy road in front of my house. It's an arterial road that goes from a rural area into pretty much downtown Salisbury. So I get a lot of traffic noise, particularly in the morning and afternoon commute hours. Just off screen here, there's an intersection. There and on this road is the Delmarva Shorebird Stadium. So in the summertime, I get a lot of traffic after the games. This down here is my fire pit where I like to hang out with my friends. And it didn't take long after I moved in. I'd be hanging out back here by my fire pit and hear a lot of this road noise. And we were getting washed out by the headlights of the people at the intersection. So, pretty quickly I started thinking about how to alleviate that. In the first couple of years I was there. And then, I mentioned in 2017, that was sort of like when I first started changing the landscape here. And that year, early in the spring, my grandmother, who taught me so much about gardening and flowers, she unfortunately passed away. And so the natural thing in my mind to do was to plant a perennial garden in her honor. And I wanted to put that in a conspicuous location so the people that knew me and knew her, when they rode by the house, they could see it. And it's I planted it right here, and you'll see that in the subsequent slides. But in addition to all these other reasons why I wanted to convert the lawn, it's a lot of grass to cut, and I don't particularly enjoy cutting grass. I don't know about you guys, but I wanted to remove as much turf lawn as possible to get some more of my free time back. All right, we've got our first video here, and this is my grandmother's memorial garden that we filmed a few weeks ago. And I will go ahead and start the video.
So when I moved in here, pretty much the entire farm was turf lawn. So just wide open, a lot of grass to cut. So I spent a lot of time riding circles in my lawnmower. And I hate cutting grass. I grew up, my father had a really big yard. That was my job at the house, was to cut the grass, and I had to do it every week. And I moved here, and I hate cutting grass. I don't want to spend all that time on the lawnmower. So when I started planting these gardens, I quickly got the idea that if I continue to expand my gardens, I'll have less grass to cut. And also, I'm providing all these habitat benefits and habitat for pollinators. And if you look here, I'm standing on a portion of my lawn. So like I said, everything was lawn when I moved in here. It looked all like this. It's low to the ground. There's a lot of wiregrass and stuff like that in here. It doesn't really support insects. It doesn't really support any wildlife. So in my mind, I would rather have a garden like this, which is beautiful, provides habitat, food, and is flowering all summer, which is great, compared to just a green lawn that does absolutely nothing for me, that I have to spend so much time maintaining, cutting the grass, that sort of thing. And if you're one of these people that wants a really green lawn, you have to throw a lot of fertilizer on it. You have to water it and all those things, and I'm just not interested in that. And I think even if you don't care about the environmental benefits and conservation benefits, my argument would be this is a million times better than just a blanket of green that doesn't support anything. So the whole point of my presentation is to show you guys that you can take your lawn and remove some of that turf grass and put some more interesting looking things like this that also provides all those benefits that I mentioned.
Alrighty, so you really get a good sense there of the road noise right up by the road, and I talk to a lot of people about the work that I'm doing on my farm, and really what I try to drive home is, I personally get so much more enjoyment out of working in my garden in the springtime, pulling weeds by hand, maybe going up and down the rows with a hoe and doing that type of work. And I ask people, would you rather do that type of work, or would you rather be doing your best NASCAR impression and driving circles for half your day every Saturday or Sunday in the summertime?
So
all right, so the question, why should we kill our lawns? And we've talked a little bit about this. I just want to go over it quickly. The lawn does absolutely nothing for you. It doesn't support native insects. The root system is shallow, so it requires a lot of water to survive. Often folks are throwing a lot of fertilizers and chemicals unnecessarily to maintain them. Excuse me. And this may seem subjective, but lawns are unappealing aesthetically, and I think there is some artistic design principles that would support this. But I just pulled this picture off of Google. You see, this is a nice house here, and presumably this homeowner, wants to show people that pass by that he's got a nice house and he can maintain this huge green mat of lawn. It's a flex, I guess you could call it. But when I see stuff like this, when I'm driving down the road, and again, I'm not an artist, but in my mind, I want to take my paintbrush to this landscape and add some color and texture to it. Plant some shrubs and trees, and maybe even a pollinator meadow, or just like small pocket gardens, and frame this view much better. And to give you an idea of what that looks like, I'm going to rely on our beloved Bob Ross. I think most people are familiar with his program, The Joy of Painting. I know I watched it actually growing up when I was hanging out with my grandparents on the farm where I live now. I would watch Bob Ross on PBS, and pretty much any painting that he does, it's in this picture. Obviously, he's superimposed on this one, but you can see the focal point of this painting is this beautiful mountain in the background and a nice lake. And if it was just the lake and the mountain, it wouldn't be an interesting picture. But Bob Ross puts the happy little trees and shrubs again to frame this picture. You've got the dark colors here, the lighter shaded shrubs here, and different species here, different texture, different colors. And with Bob superimposed here, it's definitely framing his magnificent afro and beard. So you guys can do this stuff at home. It's just a matter of reframing how we think about what we do with our landscape. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. This was in the presentation from last year, but this is a really good demonstration of the root systems of long grass compared to some native plants. You can see the root system is very shallow. And in the summertime, when it gets dry, they can't access the moisture that's deep in the soil profile when the water table drops. But I'm not going to mention all of these different species, but this is purple coneflower, a pretty common, widely available native plant that you can get. And it sends roots down, as far as 5 or 6 feet down into the soil profile. And I don't really have to water my native flower gardens in the summertime. They are adapted to this climate, and they can take it. Echinacea in particular, I say it's a bulletproof plant. I love planting echinacea. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start this video. I mentioned before about the issue with the road noise and the headlights. In this video, we'll talk about that.
And I mentioned when I first moved in here, it was mostly turf lawn, and I live on a really busy road and next to an intersection. And to my right, I've got a fire pit where I hang out some evenings if it's nice out. And the first couple of years I was living here, I noticed the intersection, people were stopping and their headlights were flooding my yard. There's a lot of noise from the road. So my first instinct was I need to build a fence or put a fence up. But the more I thought about it, it was going to be expensive. And I said, well, why don't I just start planting trees and shrubs? And so I created a hedgerow behind me. I started planting that in 2017. And it's mostly all native trees and shrubs behind me that I was able to get from free tree giveaways with Maryland Department of Natural Resources, leftover trees from plantings that I participated in. They were small seedlings. I just planted them along here, and they look like little twigs in the ground. And enough time has passed now that they've grown big and they've expanded. And now I've got this nice hedgerow behind me, which knocks the noise down from the road. It knocks the lights down. It gives me privacy. And again, it's so much better in my mind than just having a carpet of grass that's 2 inches tall. I've got these shrubs that are blocking the noise, blocking the lights, but also providing all that habitat and food for all the critters that I love.
And again, I mentioned in the video, but that living fence cost me next to nothing. Most of those trees and shrubs in there I got for free, and it's providing that habitat benefit. I just want to mention some of those species that are in there in case you guys are interested. I've got some gray dogwood, button bush, river birch, sweet bay magnolia, switchgrass, big blue stem. I've got some pawpaw trees in there, and I'm sure a few others that I'm forgetting to mention. All right, so this question comes up a lot too. Why should we be planting natives versus non-natives? A lot of the non-natives are stuff that we grew up, buying and planting in our yard. Very simply, natives are going to be almost, without question, better than non-natives every single time. Native species are adapted to the climate of this region. They need less maintenance. They also provide habitat for the native insects, which also evolved feeding off of these plants, laying their eggs on these plants. And these insects also provide food for native species that are higher on the food chain. And in in my case, what I'm interested in is birds, and we'll talk about that later. So native species are almost always better than non-natives, but I still plant a few non-natives on farm. And where I'm standing right here, I'm in front of a cut flower garden, and in front of me is the memorial garden to my grandmother that I showed you guys in a previous slide.
I'm standing in front of my cut flower garden. This is my first year of giving cut flowers for bouquets a shot. And most of the flowers that are in here, most of the species are non-natives. I've got a lot of sunflowers, zinnias, stuff like that, typical cut flower gardens. I think it's really important when we talk about native species, you want to get as many native species as possible, but I'm not somebody that says don't grow any non-native stuff. You certainly will get some pollinator benefits from non-native stuff, particularly like the sunflowers. The bees love the sunflowers. The native birds love eating the seeds. But again, what you want to shoot for is planting mostly natives and then sprinkle in the non-native stuff. And this is also a really good illustration of just removing a lot of turf lawn. You can see behind me this is a big area. This was all turf lawn. I sprayed herbicide, I killed the grass, and I put mulch on top of it and planted these flowers. And again, we're getting more benefit than just a carpet of grass with these flowers, even though most of them are non-native. I do have some echinacea and black-eyed Susans here. So again, non-native garden, I'm still working in my natives to provide that habitat and food for the critters.
Alrighty, so let's talk a little bit about how to start these gardens and meadows. The first thing that you have to do is you have to kill the grass some sort of way. I use herbicide, typically glyphosate. I know that herbicide is a hot topic right now. A lot of people are reticent to use herbicides, particularly glyphosate. So, I'm not going to give you guys a pitch on why you should use herbicide. I make that choice. I think they're mostly safe if you use them according to the label, mix them properly, and wear your proper protective gear if you decide to use herbicides. If you are hesitant to use herbicides, you can kill the grass by placing tarps down over the grass. Usually takes like 1 or 2 weeks, and all of that grass is going to die. And I also use a weed torch, which is a lot of fun. I got it from Harbor Freight. I think it was like $25. It's basically a flamethrower. A little word of caution there, just be careful with that. You don't want to be taking that to dry vegetation and starting a forest fire or anything like that. But that's an effective tool that I use so that I don't rely solely on herbicide. So yeah, once you kill the grass, The next thing that's really important is do not till the soil. Tillage isn't needed in most applications. You can just plant directly into the ground with your seeds, or if you're buying plants, you can plant right into the ground. When you till, you destroy a lot of natural processes that are happening in the soil profile. There are root channels down there from plants that have died. There are worm channels in there. There are worms that are living there that you could potentially kill by tilling the soil up. There's mycorrhizal fungi, which I've got a slide on that, a couple of slides after this to explain what that is. And those root channels and everything allow for the water to infiltrate into the soil. And when you till that, you destroy all that natural stuff that's happening in there. So leave the soil alone. You don't need to till it up. And if you have questions about no-till gardening, I can answer questions about that at the end, or there are plenty of resources online where you can learn about this stuff. Another thing that's really important is to keep soil covered with mulch. If you think about it, when you're out in the wild, you typically do not see bare soil. Soil does not want to be bare. It doesn't want the sun on it. So put mulch and compost over top of the soil. That'll help retain the moisture in the soil. It'll make it more habitable for the critters in the soil, and also will prevent competing vegetation for coming up. In the presentation last year, the concept of green mulch was discussed. You can use that as well, and just make sure you plant super dense, more dense than what the label on the plant is telling you. It'll be fine. And I got just a short video here on the green mulch.
So one of the topics that was discussed in a presentation last year about native species is the idea of using green mulch. Instead of using a bunch of wood chip mulch, which looks nice but is really expensive, this idea of green mulch is planting your plants densely so that their leaves shade out and outcompete the weeds in your garden. And I think I've got a pretty good illustration of what that looks like here. My objective, again, is to plant very dense. I have a problem with wiregrass, and I don't want the wiregrass to outcompete these native species. So I planted super dense, and you can see it here. I've got some wiregrass trying to come up here, but it's getting really tall and spindly. It's struggling to get sunlight because these echinacea plants are crowding them out. And I'm not 100% there yet, but eventually you can see this is just going to be a blanket of echinacea, and there's really not going to be anything that can survive in here because they're being outcompeted by this beneficial native species that doesn't require a lot of water, doesn't require a lot of maintenance. So that's my objective. And if you look down here, you can see these are all echinacea seedlings that came up when last season the goldfinches were on the flower heads eating the seeds, and as they were eating, they were knocking seeds to the ground. They got in the soil and they're germinating. And after a few years, again, this will just be a blanket of flowers outcompeting the weeds that we don't want in our garden.
Here's just a closer view of that green mulch. These leaves down here, this is echinacea that's coming up from last year. You can see there is some grass that's coming up here, but as this echinacea grows, it's gonna grow over top of this grass, and all I'll need to do is just come in here and just hand pull, just little sections here. All right, as promised, here is the video on mycorrhizal fungi. It's another short clip.
Over 80% of plants live in a symbiotic relationship with a remarkable organism called mycorrhizal fungi. Through this symbiosis, the fungi and the plant naturally develop a lifelong bond of mutual benefit that's existed for over 450 million years. Mycorrhiza is the term used to describe the symbiotic relationship between mycorrhizal fungi and a plant's root system. First, the spore of mycorrhizal fungi germinate in the soil and make their way to the nearest roots. The roots are then colonized by the fungi, and mycorrhiza are established. The fungi penetrate the root and create an internal network of fungal structures inside the root cells, where the plant and mycorrhizae exchange sugars and nutrients. Finally, the hyphae continue to develop outside the roots, forming an extended network of fine filaments, which cover up to 700 times more soil area than the plant's own roots. This secondary root system draws in extra beneficial nutrients and water, supporting a plant or tree for its entire lifetime.
So I tell people all the time, I am a lazy gardener. I do not want to do a bunch of work that's unnecessarily. So I want to encourage you guys to work smart, not hard. Again, if you're tilling your soil up, you're destroying that structure of the mycorrhizal fungi that's providing a benefit to your plants.
Over 80.
All right, I got a video here on native plants for birds.
So we've talked a lot about flowers, herbaceous plants, but also trees and shrubs are really important too. They also provide habitat for lots of insects that also support populations of birds and other different species. Doug Talmy is a guy that talks a lot about native plant species and stuff, and his expertise is actually insects. And one of the things that he talks about a lot is oak species are really beneficial. They host so many different species of insects. And I'm standing in front of some willow oaks that I planted from seedlings that I got for free. I planted these in 2017, and you can see they're about 15, maybe 20 feet tall at this point. Willow oak maybe isn't as great of a host as like white oak. I've got some white oaks in my yard as well. But what I like about willow oaks is they grow really fast. You can plant a small seedling, and in just a few growing seasons, you get these good-sized trees that, again, are providing habitat. They're hosting the insects that need to be on here, and I've got a good mix of other oak species. But you might ask the question, why is it important to have all these different insects on the trees? One species in particular that I think about, I am a birder. I love birds. I like putting the nests out and following that sort of stuff. Carolina chickadees require their habitat where they nest to be at least 70% of native species. And that's because as they're raising their chicks in the nest, they're not feeding them seeds from your bird feeder. They're feeding the insects that are crawling on the trees and shrubs and flowers. So you plant the oak species, it has the caterpillars that they need, that they're taking back to their nest box to feed their young. When I first moved in here, I put cavity boxes up, and occasionally I would have Carolina chickadees checking out the boxes. They might start building a nest, but I didn't have successful nests until last year. And again, it's because since 2017, I've been planting native trees, native shrubs, native flowers, and the past couple years, I have the density of native plants that'll support those chicks as they're growing. So it's kind of like a positive canary in the coal mine. It's the Carolina chickadee in your backyard. If you have Carolina chickadees hanging out, chances are you have the native species and the diversity that they need to raise their young.
So Doug Talmy, in his presentations and his books, he says that the most important thing that you can do is plant oak species. In the United States alone, oak species host 897 different species of caterpillar, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me, and a total of around 4,000 species use oaks either for nesting or food, which is just absolutely remarkable to me. So this year, Adam and I, shortly after I started, we had a conversation. I expressed my interest in birds, and I told him about the cavity nest boxes that I have on my farm. and he had some money in his budget for nest cams. So this is a nest camera here in our Carolina chickadee box. So we eventually had 5 cameras installed, and we're lucky enough to have the chickadees nest in this box again this year. I think I had 7 total chicks fledge. This was the exact day that they fledged. They were out this afternoon, and they're the Carolina chickadees in the backyard, illustrating that I'm getting close or above that threshold of 70% native plants that they need to raise their young. And just to get an idea of how small these birds are, this is a fledgling here. Just a note of caution. I generally don't encourage folks to intervene when you find a fledgling. Usually the fledgling is okay. The parents are taking care of them. But in this case, this guy was pretty far away from his mom and dad and siblings. And I was a little concerned that he was going to get scooped up by something. So I picked him up and put him in a tree where his family was hanging out. This is a good picture to illustrate. You can see on the side of their beak there. If you think of baby birds when they're first hatched, their mouths open so wide. They've got this flange here, and as they fledge and grow older, this fuses, and then they'll get a typical bird beak that you guys are accustomed to seeing. Alrighty, and actually that chickadee fledgling that I just showed in the previous slide, his family was hanging out in this river bird, so I put him up on a branch, and that's where he went. So I got a video here on stormwater management. I'll go ahead and start that.
So another benefit to planting trees and shrubs in your yard is for stormwater. As these trees grow, like this river birch behind me, I planted it as a seedling, and now it's 30 feet tall. When you get a storm event and the rain is falling, the rain will hit the canopy, and it's trickling down the leaves and the stem of the tree, and this tree is effectively slowing that rainwater down in its path towards the ground. And as it's slowing it down, that allows time for the ground to absorb it. Of course, it has tons of roots underneath of it that are pulling that water up. So again, your turf lawn, really shallow roots. It's not giving you any stormwater benefit, but a tree like this slows the water down, increases infiltration, and can alleviate some stormwater problems if you have that, or if you're concerned about that on your property.
Some other benefits that you'll get from planting trees and shrubs near your home that I didn't mention in this video. If you're planting shade trees near your house, you could potentially get lower utility costs as they shade your house from the sun. But also, and you can see just a little bit here, as these trees grow up and mature, and they drop their leaves in the wintertime, they're going to provide this layer of mulch that's going to crowd out the grass and kill it back a little bit. But also those leaves on the ground provide habitat for insects as they overwinter, or maybe if they're in their larval stage. So they have, when you do this, you're providing more native species habitat. All right, this has got a short video on cultivars versus native species. In our previous presentation from last year, we go into depth about this, but just as a recap, cultivars, you could think of them basically as hybrids of native species. Humans have created a different subspecies with certain traits that we liked, whether it's color or shape or size. So I'll go ahead and play this video for you guys.
Generally, I have a pretty positive outlook on cultivars. I don't think there's a lot of research that shows that cultivars are detrimental, but I do encourage people to plant mostly native species and work some cultivars in. And I've got a pretty good illustration here. These purple cone flowers, the echinacea, that's the native variety, and these red and orange, those are cultivars. In my experience, I've seen the pollinators, the bees, the butterflies, they're on the cultivars and the natives, but you don't know what research is going to come out in 10 years. So again, I encourage you, mostly native, work in your cultivars, work in your non-native stuff, but as long as you're mostly doing native stuff, you're going to get the benefits. One of the species that they talked about in the presentation last year was the turtlehead. The pink turtlehead is a cultivar, and it hosts the Baltimore checker spot. But the cultivar, for whatever reason, it's difficult for the butterfly to recognize, and they don't often lay their eggs on the cultivar. So the better option is to plant the white turtlehead, which is the native species, and the butterfly doesn't have a hard time identifying that and putting their eggs on that.
Okay, so yeah, here's the Baltimore checker spot here, which is a beautiful species. They are endangered. And here is a side-by-side. And I don't remember what specifically it is about the pink turtlehead cultivar that they struggle with. I think maybe the leaf is a little bit darker than the white. So yeah, when you can, plant those native species like the white turtlehead for the endangered species like the checker spot here. All right, just gonna run through some pictures real quick. This is my grandmother's memorial garden up front again, and just trying to drive home that point I made earlier about framing your house. If you care about curb appeal and that sort of thing, you've got a splash of color here. I've got sunflowers. I've got the trees and shrub in the back here, my maples around the house here. I think in my mind, this is much better looking than just a carpet of lawn here. It's looking maybe a little bit ratty here, particularly some of these black-eyed Susans are going to seed. But I don't deadhead any of my flowers. I let them stay over the winter. They provide habitat. And as the goldfinches are working through, they're going to be picking seeds off of the echinacea and the sunflowers up here. So don't worry about deadheading and cleaning your garden up, quote unquote. It's still providing habitat benefit, particularly in the wintertime. This is another view of my non-native garden here. Just a few weeks later, it's blooming out a little bit more. You can see the zinnia patch here. Here are my black-eyed Susans that are blooming. But like I mentioned before, this is non-native mostly, but I work in my natives. I've got a fringe tree here. I've got a cedar tree over here, sycamore, elderberry, buttonbush over here, redbud. So just work your natives in, even if you're planting non-natives to get that benefit. I'm not going to talk too much about the monarch caterpillars. I think most people are at least somewhat aware of some of the struggles that the monarch caterpillar has, but they feed exclusively on milkweed species Asclepias. This is a swamp milkweed, and they have evolved to eat the milkweed plant, which has a toxic sap, and that's an adaptation that predators can't eat a monarch caterpillar because they have accumulated this toxin in their body. But if you plant milkweed, you're going to be supporting the caterpillars in addition to having the butterflies cruising through and feeding off of the nectar. All right, so think back to that first picture I showed you at the beginning slide. This is my progress picture that I took last week from pretty much the same area. You can see those loblolly seedlings are nice and tall now. And here are the willow oaks where I had that one slide talking about birds. So it's growing up in just a handful of years. I've got all this interesting landscape going on, and you can see the splash of color up front with my grandmother's garden. And I think in maybe 10 years or so, I'm going to have a nice privacy hedge here. And like I mentioned before, that's going to knock down some of the road noise and give me more privacy while also giving me all those benefits that we talked about. I got some resources here. I mentioned Doug Talmy. He's an entomologist and University of Delaware professor. If you ever have a chance to go see him speak, I know a lot of his presentations are on YouTube. He's got 3 really great books that I've mentioned here, and an article last year about why you should plant oak trees that was in the New York Times. Another great resource for gardeners is the local University Extension office in Maryland. It's the University of Maryland Extension. They can put you in contact with the master gardeners, teach you about soil testing, and keep you aware of learning opportunities similar to this. And I think this is where you're going to meet other gardeners to learn from them. And also the Maryland Backyard Buffer Program through Maryland's Department of Natural Resources. If you live in Maryland, you can get 25 seedlings every April. They do this, so check out their website. Contact your local forester if you live in Maryland for more details about that. All right, that's all that I have. I've got the Alliance's social media up here. I've got my email address. If you guys have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I've also included my my Instagram handle here. That page is pretty much devoted to some of the conservation work that I've done and that I am doing on the farm. So if you're interested and want to learn from that, please feel free to follow me there. And I think we have ended a little bit sooner than I thought it would, so we've got more time for questions.
Yeah, wow. Thanks, Tyler. That was an incredibly informative presentation, and we do have some questions. We had some that came in through the chat as you were presenting, so you want me to read some of them to you?
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So we have one here from Christine. When you sprayed the turf with herbicide, how long did you wait to plant flowers? A season or a year?
It depends on what the label says. I think with glyphosate, they tell you to wait at least 2 or 3 days. I let it start getting brown before I start planting. But it's not very long. But again, just make sure you're reading your label if you are choosing to use herbicide.
Great. So we have a question from Stephen. What is a good mid-sized tree that I can plant about 10 to 15 yards from south-facing windows that give a lot of shade this time of year, but will lose their foliage and allow a lot of sun rays in the winter?
I think the first species that comes to mind is the eastern redbud. That's a cool tree or shrub to plant. It is deciduous, so it will drop its leaves, and it is like a mid-sized tree. I think it taps out around 25 to 30 feet. But if you can shoot me an email with that question, I can get up with our forest team, and they are much more knowledgeable about that, and they will probably give me more species than you guys wanted. But yeah, please shoot me an email about that, and I'll get up with Zach Carnegie, our Maryland forest coordinator.
Sure, sounds good. Amanda asked on Facebook, do you have any jumping worms at your house in your gardens?
If I do, I'm not aware of that species. I do have, some invasive bugs. Occasionally, I will use pesticide to control them, depending on what the species is. There is one organic pesticide that I like to use. It's called Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew. And I think it comes from some naturally occurring bacteria in the soil. I'm not sure if it would control that species, or if that's even a species you're looking to control. But as far as I know, I don't have that species of insect.
Tyler, what are your plans for your garden? What are you going to do next?
Yeah, so expansion is the name of the game now. When I planted my grandmother's flower garden, it was about half the size that it is now. And every year I just bump it out more and more to again reduce that turf lawn and give me less time on the lawnmower. In the front yard, I don't have too many plants there, but I want to start planting some maybe understory trees and shrubs in the front yard to again reduce that turf lawn. But yeah, the name of the game is expansion. I don't think I'll ever get to the point where I won't have any grass. I'd like to have some grass for walkways and stuff like that. But just anything that I can do to reduce that turf lawn is my ultimate goal.
Do you have any tips for native plants that do well in the shade?
Sure. Yeah, I saw that question come up a lot when folks were registering. I do have some shady areas, and off the top of my head, phlox is usually a good species that'll tolerate shade. Woodland sunflower seems to tolerate the shade in my garden. Trying to think what the other ones are. Ferns, there are some native ferns that you can plant that I've planted up by my house. Foam flower, Virginia bluebell. I think the white turtlehead that I mentioned will tolerate at least part shade, and I think it actually likes wet soils. So yeah, those are just a few that I implement. And again, if you're having trouble finding these species, shoot me an email and I can do some research for you and try to figure out some other species. But those are the ones that I use.
Looking over some of the questions that we got as people were registering, it seems like there's some questions around like getting started. Like you're envisioning this yard that you have. It's just turf lawn. Where's a good place to get started, and then where should people be thinking about going to buy these plants? Can you just give a couple of tips for if you've got a turf lawn, where should they get started, and then maybe if they've got some non-native stuff in a garden, what's some native stuff that would play well if they started planting in there?
Sure. And this initial answer might seem like a bit of a cop-out, but I would say just go out there and start. I think a big barrier for a lot of folks is just that they think that they don't have the knowledge or skills that they need. Everybody's walking around with a supercomputer in their pocket. So utilize the internet and find those online forums where folks are talking about the native plant gardening and stuff like that. I mean, you can just Google native flowers to Maryland and you'll get so many web hits these days. So that's a great place to start. As far as buying your plants and seeds, I would typically stay away from the big box stores. I have a really hard time finding native species in those, although occasionally they do have some. A lot of those big box stores will sell those invasive plants, which are absolutely terrible. So what I would recommend is try to find local nurseries, give them a call and ask them if they have native plants. And the native plant nurseries are on the rise. It's becoming a popular thing. So just do a little investigation. I buy a lot of my plants from one nursery down here, just south of where I live in Salisbury, but also Parkside High School in Salisbury has a horticulture program, and it's part of their VOTEC program, and the kids learn how to grow plants from seed. And the teacher there, his name is Jerry, he was telling me that the kids, they're interested in native plants and they do a lot of the research for the species that are really important. So I try to buy as much as I can from them. So look into that if you have a horticulture program. But the biggest thing is if you're going into a local nursery and they don't have native species, ask them. Say, hey, this is something that I want. I mean, ultimately, you're the consumer. They're in business to make money. So if their consumers are coming in and saying that their customers are coming in saying that we want this, they might start thinking about that. Also, I've been kind of surprised. Amazon has a lot of native seeds. So sometimes I'll just go on Amazon if I'm looking for a particular species of seed. I'll look on there. But again, Google's your friend. Just go on there and look around and see what's out there.
All right, I think we probably have time for one more, and I think it's a good one. What native plants and shrubs would be good for someone who maybe has an HOA and, you know, they want something that's kind of low maintenance, but doesn't spread too much and it's gonna, you know, stay looking kind of tidy?
Yeah, that is a good question. Yeah, I think the HOA is like the natural enemy of the the lawn conversion. I think a lot of the folks that are involved in HOAs are turf lawn folks, and that can be difficult to navigate. I know that I think attitudes are changing a little bit as far as small, tidy shrubs. Nothing is coming to mind, but the echinacea, you know, that's usually around 2 to 3 feet tall. So it sort of acts like a shrub. So if you're looking for you know, something that's low to the ground, you could look into putting you know, echinacea and black-eyed Susan, that sort of thing. Similar to the other question about tree species, if you shoot me an email, I can talk to our forest team and they will give me, I'm sure, plenty of options that I can send to you.
Cool, thanks, Tyler. Echinacea is the purple cone flower for folks like myself, right?
Yeah.
Who aren't,
Yes.
yeah,
Sorry
gotcha.
about that.
Yeah, no worries, man. Well, thanks, Tyler. And thank you everyone for joining us. A couple of notes here. Following the call, you'll receive an email from me with a link to the recording if you didn't get a chance to catch the whole thing. And if you have any questions, you can certainly get in touch by responding to that email or Tyler's email that he has here up on the screen right now. As a reminder, we're holding Ask the Alliance every Thursday at noon through August. So don't forget to check out our events page on our website or on Facebook to learn more about upcoming Ask the Alliance sessions. Upcoming, we have birding in the watershed, bees, managing your stormwater, identifying trees in the watershed, and how to stop trash from entering our waterways. So we've got some really great presentations coming up. So with that, for myself and on behalf of the Alliance, thank you so much for being here and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, guys. See you.